Hello, everyone. Welcome to night 22 of the Orphan's Tales live reading series. Just waiting for people to come online. I'm sorry for missing 2 days. I was so sick, and I never get sick like that. I don't know what happened to me. I didn't even have anything to eat. I just spent a whole day throwing up, and then the next day my voice was so shredded that I couldn't. I mean, you can hear my voice is still not great, and I just taught a whole clarion class, so it was going to be a sultry reading tonight. Yeah, it was just crazy. I threw up in the bathtub. It was a new low for me. I don't know what happened. It was horrible, just awful. But I am back, and we are back with more. I almost just gave you a huge spoiler there. More cold people on a pier excitement. So yeah, I hope everybody had a lovely time while I was gone. Got refreshed, ready to come back and hear some more fairy tales. I hope everybody is doing well, still holding up. Good Lord, it feels like this thing is never going to end. Every time I catch myself starting to feel optimistic, I think about another business that's not doing well, and it's just oh God, let's not. Gross. It's all terrible. The world's terrible. But fairy tales are not terrible. So yeah, let's do our housekeeping. As always, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of the Orphan's Tales. This is a play. It's a one-woman show. Infinite nights only. Good Lord. God knows how much longer this is going to go on. You can find albums based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can follow me on Patreon at Kat Valenti, where I do all kinds of things from recipes to writing instruction. If you missed my clarion class tonight, I do classes every month on Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. And there is a tip jar in my Instagram profile as well as on my website at katherinemvalenti.com. You are absolutely not required to tip in any way. But these are a lot of work to put together, and times are super tight for us. So anything that you might be moved to put in your witch's hat, it's deeply appreciated, and I will thank you personally on the next stream. Okay, well, let me deal with my throat for a second. We'll get started. I can never remember all of them. You can catch up on the archive at Kat Valenti Live. On YouTube, that's my YouTube channel, and you can ask me questions afterwards, but it's very awkward when I sit here and wait for people to ask questions and sip my wine. So think of questions while I'm reading, and then you can type them quickly. Yay, I remembered all of them. All right, let's get started with the Net Weaver's Tale. If everyone has forgotten, we've got two cold ladies, Snow and Sigrid, sitting on a pier, mending nets and talking shit, as ladies do. The Net Weaver's Tale. When I first became a woman, and the blood was still high in my cheeks, red and quick, I longed to leave the frozen waste of my family's lands. There was nothing there for me any longer. My brothers and sisters were all grown, gone to temple or farm. My mother did not want to look at me, hoping that I too would find my way out of her house. But I lingered. There were still things I loved in the snow, and I was a little afraid to go into the world. One spring, when the lichen was green-fringed and springy, a group of monks came to our village. All strangers are sacred to us, so they were taken in without question. My mother drew the lot to house them, and that was how it came to pass that 3 brothers ate, spoke, and slept under our snow-thatched roof. At first they kept their deep scarlet hoods over their heads, mumbling thanks and bowing stiffly over their suppers of near raw fox and leafy lichen. I was intensely curious, as all maids of that age are, and I peered beneath their cowls throughout supper, trying to catch a glimpse of their faces. Finally, the middle brother straightened, threw back his crimson cloak, and fastened his milky yellow eyes onto mine. "Is this what you wanted to see, little one?" he growled. And indeed he did growl it, For though these monks had the bodies of strong-calved men, their heads were those of great dogs, tongues hanging from their jaws like the clappers of bells. Their fur was thick and deep, falling to their shoulders, rough cut as the beards of mountain sages. One brother had a bluish-white pelt, another was black and brown in patches, and the last was a deep red gold, like the hair of a girl. The eyes of each were chill and hard, the color of old mosses, gray and gold, all at once. I could not help but gasp. My wonder only made the middle one laugh, a sound like the grinding of boulders. We're not werewolves, love, if that's what you're thinking, the red dog chuckled. Kynocephaloi, dog heads, entirely different. Vegetarian, for one thing, said the white one, gesturing at his plate where the pink fox meat lay untouched. My mother apologized profusely, deathly afraid she had polluted them. Some number of my sisters had entered the priesthood, and Mother was ever sensitive to religious niceties. The middle one, clearly a pack leader of sorts, looked up with his liquid eyes and reassured her. No, meat does not offend us. We simply choose to eschew it. It appeals to the higher nature of the self to put aside food which once lived. I do not consider myself food. Why should I ask all other creatures to consider themselves so? Our order is, however, rather strict. We certainly do not ask our host to know our scriptures, certainly not when we have been so rude as to eat without sharing ourselves. But we too are wary of violating spiritual etiquette. This is a land of many faiths. Some do not permit the sacred guest to speak of himself or at all. Others do not allow names to be uttered before the meal is finished. As we have quite finished all that we are permitted to eat, I will begin. I am Bartholomew, and these are my brothers Balthazar, he said, indicating the blue-white Kynocephalus, and Bagdemagus, indicating the red. Turning to me, he added in a mischievous tone, "You can call me Bags. We all do. We belong to the Order of the Scarlet Hood, for beneath the hood we are all one." At this, all three made a delicate motion with their hands and whispered some sort of prayer. Balthazar took up the thread of their introduction then, rasping through his long teeth. "We are traveling home, to Alanur, City of Light, and the Chrysanthemum Tower. We are a delegation sent to mediate a great quarrel in our faith. And now that our part is done, we are permitted to return to the tower which gave us birth." I must have seemed such a child to them, sitting plate-eyed and loose-mouthed at their feet, savoring the foreign tang of the word on my tongue like a spiced cake. Alanur. My mother eyed me with suspicion, and I ignored her. I begged to be told of this city, which in my heart I already knew must be the holiest city ever to sit on the earth. "Truly, girl, have you never heard of the City of 12 Towers?" Bartholomew stroked his fur as though it were a beard and peered at me. "Seat of the Papas, she who was born in the purple, the anointed city which shines like a summer star." "Never," I cried breathlessly. "Well, very well," he chuckled, straightening his back like a teacher about to give lesson. "Your kind mother permitting, I shall tell you of the dreaming city enclosed in her seraphic spires." The city's tale. "Listen, child, and I will tell you of Alanur, seat of the 12 Towers of the anointed city. She was founded 1,000 years ago, in the year 753 of the Second Caliphate. The foundations of the towers were poured in agate and porphyry. The tapered windows were chiseled into graceful arches. Clear green ponds were dug from the loamy soil, tamarinds and palms were planted, willows and pale-barked birch. Aqueducts ran with sweet water, gurgling up through fountains of silver and glass. Roads were arranged in concentric circles according to the Lo Shen board, our sacred game, named for the river goddess who laid her waters around the blessed city. The roads were paved in lapis and turquoise, stones which were plentiful in the surrounding mountains. Even today, the cobbled walkways keep their deep blue sheen. Markets sprang to life like mushrooms after a rain, filling the closes and keeps with the scent of saffron and broiling meat. Traders came to sell dolls and cabinets, sleek red horses and love charms, but they stayed to contemplate the divinity that resides in the exchange of gold in the marvelous towers which comprise the many hearts of the city. The towers were themselves arrayed in the pattern of the Chang'o configuration, the ideal defensive deployment of the Lo Shen pieces. On the outer rim rose up the tower of Sun and Moon, whose roof was tipped with a great diamond and a great topaz, melted into one another in an unimaginable furnace. Now one stone, it refracts the light of the heavens onto the city in a shower of prisms. There is the Tower of Patricides, bright with blood, trickling between its polished stones, a thin, steady flow which pools in the glowering crimson moat at its base, and the Tower of Ice and Iron, its twisted metallic spire bruising the clouds. On the second ring lay the Coral Tower, its deep rose pocked and rippled with anemones, kept moist by loving novices. The Tower of Hermaphrodites, hung with veils and inscribed with sacred ideographs, silver ink on a golden wall. The Chrysanthemum Tower, the living stone ablaze with 16 pointed flowers, flashing gold and scarlet in the noonday sun. And the Tower of St. Sigrid, bristling with ships' prows and wheels and masts. In the innermost circle were built the Nightingale Tower, through whose walls the wind whistled, singing sweetly as a tiny brown bird. And the Tower of the 9 yarrow stalks, whose very surface was a divinatory device, painted in 1,000 shades. The pattern of sun and shadow on the colors is still interpreted daily within those walls. There were also the towers of the living and the dead, which one stood straight and tall, one walled in hawk and falcon feathers, with tufts of fur thatching the roof and doors of serpent skin, the other riddled black with catacombs and crannies. But over the centuries they have leaned further and further from their bases until they almost touch. Now there is a small bridge of silk and ebony between the upper rooms of the towers of life and death, and the initiates move freely between them. Finally, in the center of Alinor, a slender, simple tower was erected, fashioned from camphor wood and the roots of rose trees, knobbled with silver nail heads glittering like constellations set into polished walls. Its roof was thatched from willow whips, its windows shaded in soft deer skin, and this is the Tower of the Pappus, the holiest site of this holy city. For Alinor is the seat of a dozen faiths, all presided over by the Pappus, whose wisdom has guided us from our earliest days. Each tower is a self-contained spiritual sphere, each with its liturgies and fasts and scriptures. They recognize the divine in myriad ways, but recognition of the Pappus ensures peace. The Caliphate, which rules the surrounding countryside, allows Alinor complete sovereignty, and thus it has gone in prosperous and tranquil fashion across the long years. From every direction come young men and women, seeking to spend their lives in contemplation, and there, under the light of sun and moon, they find a path that suits them. Alinor is a carved box, which holds the wisdom of the world, knowledge lost to all but our spindled towers. It is the paradise of the wishful and the wise. There have, of course, been interruptions in our peace. When Gifron the Forgiving died, the Caliphate elevated an outsider, Ragnhild, first of her name, to the papacy, and installed her in Shadukium, a city to the east, in an attempt to draw the wealth of Alinor to itself, and transfer the religious authority, which has always resided in the 12 towers, to that apostate city, where, by no great coincidence, the treasury of the Caliph was kept. This false Pappus, called the Black, was a great crisis for the towers, for the process by which a new Pappus is chosen is a complex one, requiring the consent of all the sects in the city as well as the papal household. Gifron had died suddenly, and the successor had not been confirmed. From the Tower of the Hermaphrodites, a candidate arose, while the Black Pappus became more and more entrenched in Shadukium and the minds of the people. Alinor was as filled with chaos as a winter storm with lightning. All agreed that Presbyter Sveti was highly qualified and beloved, purity of soul echoing in every spoken word and graceful movement. Nevertheless, the appointment could not be agreed upon. As must be obvious even to you, my child, the adherents within the Tower of Hermaphrodites reveal themselves to be neither male nor female. There is no shame in this for them. It is simply their nature, the nature of the cosmos as they conceive it. Though each was born a daughter or a son, they clothe themselves plainly, bind up their hair, and uncover the secret of their sex to no one. For them, the most divine of all things is the merging of opposites, of light and dark, of sacred and profane, of male and female. They believe that they are blessed so long as they maintain a balance, hanging like a human pendulum between two states, uniquely able to experience the world as both man and woman, and as neither. But the papacy is a matriarchy and has always been thus, and so to some Sveti seemed a sacrilege, polluting the holy seat. If the presbyter were male, it was unthinkable he could claim the seat. If female, she must declare it before all and preserve the law of the city. The conflagration of this debate engulfed the city in red flames. Of course, Sveti's tower had never held that highest of offices, and felt that any refusal to accept so illustrious a candidate was a bold-faced insult to their order. Many, such as the Tower of the Patricides, themselves an all-male sect, and the Draghi Celesti of the Tower of Ice and Iron, warrior priests utterly loyal to the traditions of the city who hide their faces behind identical ivory serpent masks, would not support any alteration to the laws of succession, partly out of fear that their own internal customs could then be altered. No one would dare set the precedent. Sveti, who loved Alinor above all things, feared that in the roiling furor the papacy would be destroyed in the hands of Ragnhild and the caliphate before a decision could be made, and withdrew from consideration. Yet no other candidate was so worthy, so capable of battle or meditation with equal ease, or so well beloved among the towers as Sveti of the bell-deep voice. All agreed that at the time of the crisis only Sveti could lead them against Shadukiam. It was only shape of hip and curve of lash which was in question, never the holiness of the presbyter, nor the sincerity of faith. The whole city was at a stalemate, and Ragnhild all the while consolidated her authority, growing fat as an engorged spider in the east. And so it came to pass that Sveti appeared one morning in the jade pavilion, which spread out from the papal tower, shimmering green and white under the thin winter clouds. She had removed the ritual clothing of her tower, and donned a dress which closed her waist into a curve and flowed over her legs to trail its dark velvet over the jade floor of the courtyard. Her breasts, which had never seen the sun, rose smooth as new paper from the embroidered bodice. She had loosed the traditional 7 knots from her hair and let it fall to her shoulders, straight as virtue. She had pulled rings onto her fingers and scented her skin, painted her lips, and pulled silk slippers onto her feet. She needn't have done it. Her word to her sex would have been enough. But all that finery was the extent of her humility, showing us all how far she would go to be what the city asked her to be. She stood before the tower as though before the hangman's noose, tears streaming down her proud cheeks. Yet her mouth never quivered as she knelt before the feet of the papal household and forswore the tenets of her faith, vowing thenceforward to serve only the papal tower, and never again to hide her nature. In all things she would serve the greater need of the city, emulating the line of papacies which had come before her. With stunned tears springing to their own eyes, the household accepted her pledge, and the towers, awed and humbled, confirmed Presbyter Sveti as the 17th Pappas of Alinor. On the day of her ascension, Sveti went into the cavernous mausoleum beneath the tower and kissed the coffin of her predecessor with great tenderness. She announced to all those shadowy rooms that she would take the name of Gifron, the dead Pappas, as her own. Gifron II led a great army of Draghi Celesti in their 1,000 identical masks against Shadukiam, and sent the tongues and the breasts of the black Pappas to the caliphate in a silver box. While on campaign, it was noted by her generals that Gifron always bound her hair in 7 knots before riding into battle. The rest of Ragnhild she yielded to the judgment of the Draghi, who left the apostate's body fastened to the earth with golden chains at the precise center point between Alinor and Shadukiam. And for 500 years, the caliphate quelled its desire to interfere with the succession of the Holy Seat. The Netweaver's tale continued. I was sleepy then, resting my head on the rough-hewn table and letting Bartholomew's voice roll over me like gentle water over stones. But Alinor had risen up in me in all its colors, and I could feel a yearning for it turning and warming itself in my belly. All my siblings had gone. I was ready. Why should I not leave this wretched hut, where my mother's eyes scalded my back wherever I walked? Take me with you, I whispered. Sitting up, my eyes suddenly bright and calculating as a hungry little cat in the snow. Take me to Alinor, to the chrysanthemum tower and the green pools under the willow. I will become wise there, just like you'll see. I clutched his hand tightly, but seeing his startled expression, let the callous fingers fall back to our table. Bags, for so I already called him in my heart, peered closely at me, his eyes narrowing to tiny moon slivers in the red bleed of his fur. He looked to Bartholomew and whispered, "And the wolf shall lead her astray." "What?" I asked, straining to hear their suddenly hushed voices. But Bartholomew grinned hugely, his ponderous tongue hanging out of his mouth in a most friendly fashion. "Nothing, my dear," interrupted Balthazar, shaking his ice-colored fur. "Just a bit of scripture. The Book of Carrion, chapter 28, verse 10. If you are to come with us, you will learn that and much more. Certainly we will have you. We cannot turn a seeker away by the laws of our tower. But perhaps it is not solely our decision." My mother's ponderous back was turned to us, and it shook slightly with tears, sorrow or relief I could not tell, smothered as quickly as snow sliding from a pine bough to the frozen earth. I went to her and put my hands on her shoulders, leaning my head against her warm skin. "Go," she spat hoarsely. "Just go. If the stars wish us to meet again, they will fashion the path before your feet." She shrugged me off and disappeared from the great room with her heavy, lumbering gait. I began to pack food for myself and my new brothers. We would need bread for the journey south. The pale girl's tale continued. "You're not bored, are you, love?" Sigrid shifted on her bench. Nets nodded over her hands like silver rings. The sun was well past noon, and the sickly light of the northern summer spilled over the windless water below the quay, thin as milk. "Oh, no," breathed Snow, her colorless lips spreading into something like a smile. "Don't stop. Did you ever see the 12 Towers? Did you meet the Pappas? Was she very beautiful?" "I don't believe I've ever heard you put so many words together in the same place, girl. If you're not careful, they'll get together and have babies, and then we'll never shut you up." Snow was stricken for a moment, then tore her eyes from Sigrid as though she had been caught staring through a shop window full of cakes, furiously tying her net with shivering fingers. Sigrid's face became soft in all the places it had been hard. Her cheeks melted into a rough affection. "Love, I've never been anyone's mother. I don't know how to talk to young or old. But don't stop smiling just because I flap my mouth and say something that's not dressed around the edges like a lace tablecloth. Thicken up and we'll get along fine." They were quiet together for a while, listening to the creak and rock of the ships in port, the tightening of the wet ropes that tied them to the pier. Gulls cackled in their witch-reedy voices, swooping into the shallows for fat pink fish. Snow's silvery hair was dark with damp, curling against her dress. At last Sigrid began to speak again, neither pausing nor slowing her work as she talked. "As to the great city, I did go, far to the south, out of the white wastelands, across a scrub desert where there was no water, and through valleys where wine grapes grew big as plums. The dogmen never seemed to tire, and their red hoods kept out all manner of storm and sun blisters, where I had only my little shift and a ragged fur cloak." And we will pick up tomorrow with the Netweaver's Tale again. Thank you so much for listening. Does anybody have any questions? I see so much of 22-year-old me in that chapter. All of my classical education, Born in the Purple and the 12 Towers, which is there's a city in Italy that has those towers, and I can't remember the name of it now. Has all these academic towers, and it's based on that. And the Kanakaphaloi are a real medieval beastie from a bestiary. It's Greek for dog head, very literal. It's all over the place with my classics degree. Is it weird reading about the gender stuff in the towers now? Yeah, I started reading that. And I'm like, oh, I hope I didn't fuck it up. It was 2003. It was a long time ago. We didn't know as much as we do now. I hope I did okay. I hope so. I tried. You guys can tell me. It's certainly weird seeing first of her name. I hadn't read Game of Thrones at that point. No one really had. No news of the villa, unfortunately. Our chicken that has gone missing. I'm glad you think I did all right. I did quite have a moment there of like, I don't remember how this turns out, but I hope it's okay. It's hi Kate. It's such a strange thing to go back and reread any of these, but certainly getting into stuff that's more complex. The first half of the book is pretty simple fairy tale stuff, and it definitely complexifies as it goes on. But it's definitely it's definitely a dip into gender waters that were definitely not being plumbed by high fantasy at the time. So I'm glad that you think I did okay with it. I'm glad my 22-year-old self did not screw anything up for the future too badly. But yeah, it's definitely it's an odd thing to reading something that you wrote when you were so young, and it's all these things that I was obsessed with back then, all these things that I was so desperate to put into a story, all these things that I loved from my college days and all the classical reading I did, all kinds of Greek, and there's so many like little jokes that only another dorky classicist would get. But hey, Talon. Thank you. I'm glad you liked the reading. My voice is so shredded tonight. It's still not 100% there. So I appreciate you soldiering through that first grindy part. Did I write the stories separately, then nest them, or some other method? I wrote it straight through from first word to last word. I can't write a book in any other way. I have ADD. I can't do that. So yeah, all the way through from the, I never ducked out and finished a tale altogether and then interleaved it. It was just all of a piece. There was something, I mean, there was a fairly significant editing process on the first book, but it was only really adding stories, but again, I would add them by starting a new one and then skipping a few pages and keep going with it, and because you'll see as we go on how interconnected some of these stories really are. It gets deep, so I had to interleave all the way through. I'm glad you like the cities thing. I mean, and thank you, Kate. Kate, there is somebody watching who knew me when I was 22, and I think was sitting next to me when I was writing the early parts of this book. So, yay, I was an adorable 22-year-old. Having to write all these cities actually is the reason Palimpsest exists. Right after I finished In the Cities of Coin and Spice, Ekaterina Sidia asked me to write a story for an urban fantasy anthology called Paper Cities, and I was just like, I do not have another city in me. I've written so many cities lately, I don't have another one. Can't think of anything. And I ended up writing this story about cities on skin because I was just so sick of doing traditional fantasy cities. So in a way, there's a through line there. Have I ever tried to sketch out any outfits from my stories? If I could choose one for yourself, what would come to mind? Yeah, no, because I can't draw. I'm very, very bad at drawing. So no, but I certainly see it in my head. If I could draw, I would probably be able to do all kinds of other things like designing clothes. I don't know, probably the watchful dress from Fairyland, because it's infinitely useful. If I could make one. And parts of it were written in Kate's flat. In one of the early videos I talked about how many countries the Orphan's Tales was written in. Parts of the Orphan's Tales were written in a wide variety of nations across the world. It's kind of crazy how far it traveled on my little white laptop. The Red Wind's coat would be nice too. Man, I have a green velvet coat that somebody made me, a very beautiful one. From Fairyland, so I at least have that. But there's definitely some cool clothes in Orphan's Tales, and of course the dog-headed men in the Red Riding Hood. I mean, it's the fairy tale lover's fairy tale book. There's more references than you can shake a stick at. Any other questions? Well, we can do our outro stuff while you're thinking about it. So you can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can follow me on Patreon at Kat Valenti, where I do recipes and excerpts from upcoming work and essays on how to write a good book, all kinds of stuff every month. You can follow me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. You can catch up with the archive and not miss a night at my YouTube channel, which is Kat Valenti Live. I usually upload these between 1 and 2 hours after the stream goes down. And there is a tip jar in my Instagram profile as well as on my website at catherinemvalenti.com. These are all totally free for as long as the quarantine lasts, but times are very tight for us. So if you are moved to toss a coin to your witch, I'm deeply, deeply grateful, and I will thank you by name on the next stream. Are there any echoed characters from the Orphan Tales in Fairyland? I thought I remembered Robbie's Garden from Fairyland. No. I mean, if you can find something that seems like a reference to Robbie's Garden, I'm happy to say in future interviews that I totally meant it and seem smarter than I am. But I don't think there's any Orphan Tales reference in there, in intentional ones. But you know, every writer has things they like to write over and over again, and it all I know that I've put other bits and bobs to reference my books, but they're not a shared universe like Stephen King or some of the other ones. I only just realized SJ was the one who read the audio for the second Fairyland book. She did, and she does some Orphan Tales reading on her albums as well. They're really great. If I could design a tower for my cult, what would it look like? I have no idea. I don't know. I feel like the whole city is my cult, because... Oh, my cult from Twitter. Oh, you're totally talking about Cult Valenti from Twitter. Well, it would have to be the coziest tower. This is all because some crazy woman on Twitter accused me of trying to start a cult because I said something about... I tweeted about magic and that everybody believes in some form of magic, but apparently my saying Christianity has magic in it is evil and wrong, and me trying to start a cult. So everybody has chipped in to design the cult. It is the coziest cult. So yes, the tower would have to be made out of like super soft chenille and cake because it's the cozy cult. And like we all wear bathrobes, and yes, definitely a teapot spout on the outside where you can just... Yeah, and tea and coffee, you know, we're very accepting of everyone's lifestyle choices. Well, am I a cult leader? Am I not a cult leader? This crazy lady on Twitter says I am, and hundreds of people have now chipped in to design the world's coziest cult. So, kinda, I guess. I don't know. You are totally... Everyone is invited to this cult as long as you're not a dick. Don't be a dick in this cult. You can't be mean. You have to be cozy. Cozy is the law. What was that? Yeah, cozy is the law, cozy under will. But yes, it's I don't know, it's taken on a life of its own. People have talked about t-shirts. If I see a hashtag Cult Valenti t-shirt at a con, I will die laughing. But it's definitely been a fun little diversion in the quarantine to come up with all of these silly rules for the cozy cult. Yes, people on the internet are right about me at all times and at the same time. Yeah, blanket forts everywhere. We'll have like a blanket fort awning coming out of the front of the tower, and then like a whole floor that's just a labyrinth of blanket forts. The cozy cult is pretty awesome, I gotta say. It's like it's been really good. It's been very very fun to just take someone losing their mind on me on Twitter and turn it into something that's sweet and inclusive and everybody can sort of have fun LARPing about. Because as we all know, someone losing their mind on you on Twitter is exactly what you want out of your quarantine. So yeah, that's what I've been doing while I was sick. That and watching slick British murder shows, because that's part of my coziness. Yeah. Well, I'd forgotten about the cult for a minute, and I am now remembered and made cozy all over again. That's how we know I've made it. Well, I welcome you all to the cult. It is just a place to snuggle and read books, and but you know, if you don't want to snuggle, that's fine too, because we respect everyone's boundaries. It's a very, very respectful cult. We're not about making anyone uncomfortable. The Kool-Aid's just Kool-Aid. And, you know, we like to do artisanal Kool-Aids, you know, a lot of more unique flavors, not death flavored. It was Flavor Aid anyway. Yeah, so once the quarantine's over, party at Cult House. I love you guys so much. I'll see you tomorrow night, same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. and we'll get right back to our crazy cult land. Judging by the popularity of My Favorite Murder, yes, many people enjoy creepy stuff to be cozy, but the base of this cult is the coziness, and like we can tell creepy stories and everything. We tell it from the coziness of our ritual terry cloth robes and mugs of tea. Good night, everyone. Have as good an evening as you possibly can. Bye bye.